During one of the most turbulent periods of American history, a dispute over a dead pig would ignite an international conflict that would span more than 12 years. Known to history as the Pig War, the standoff would become an early example of international mediation and eventually put an end to America's territorial expansion in the Pacific Northwest. Although the blame for the conflict is often placed on a pig and an angry farmer, many individuals were in fact instrumental in the escalation of the crisis. An American Indian hunter, notorious for his ruthless strategies in the Mexican-American War the year before. An aspiring captain, anxious for glory and a chance to prove himself. A governor, troubled by American prospectors and squatters encroaching on his territory. A farmer, desperate to establish his homestead on a rocky island. Motivated by the recent victory in Mexico, the ideology of expansion and rumors of gold, this farmer, the pig, and the armies and navies of two rival nations would threaten war in the United States on the eve of its own Civil War. The year is 1859. The young country of America has experienced its share of growing pains. Each obstacle to its expansion was met by the point of the bayonet. In its drive to the south, conflicting borders resulted in a major war with Mexico in 1846. In the west, American expansion drove the Indian nations into inhospitable reservations. Following this pattern, American growth to the north was certainly no exception. As early as 1812, the United States attempted to invade Canada. By 1848, American diplomats had secured most of the territory south of the 49th parallel for the United States, with Vancouver Island remaining in British control. The ambiguous wording of the treaty proved a stumbling block for the peace process. To keep Vancouver in British control, the border was to pass between the island and the mainland, down the middle of the channel. Unbeknownst by the writers of the treaty, located in the middle of the channel were the San Juan Islands. The local British authorities claimed the border passed along Rosario Strait, making the islands Canadian, while American settlers declared the Haro Strait as the border. In the years leading to the dispute, both countries would push for settlers to dwell on the islands to ensure a numerical superiority. Relations, however, would soon be strained by conflicting land claims, arguments over resources, and nationalistic resentment left over from their troubled history. With animosity brewing, the problem would come to a head on San Juan Island. Acting as a de facto authority in the region, the Hudson Bay Company operated a large sheep farm with several outposts spread out across the island. Charles Griffin, a manager working near the southern end of the island, grew concerned with the number of Americans settling near his land. In a letter to Governor Douglas, he wrote, "There are now upwards of 16 squatters who have recently come and established themselves on various parts of the island, all claiming to be citizens of the United States, and they have one and all taken up claims and making improvements on the most valuable prairies I have in possession of my herdsmen and stock." On June 15, 1859, one of Griffin's pigs is shot by an American named Lyman Cutler. He offers to pay for the pig, but Griffin insists that he stand trial. For the next month, British authorities would seek Cutler's arrest. In a letter thinly veiled as a plea for protection from Indians, Cutler and several of his American neighbors petitioned the Department of Oregon for a military presence on the island. When General William Harney hears about the threats on San Juan Island, he sees an opportunity. A veteran of American wars in Mexico and against the Plains Indians, Harney is no stranger to the use of force in the acquisition of territory. Unliked by most of his superiors, Harney rose in the army only with the help of his close friend and patron, Andrew Jackson. Much like Old Hickory, Harney held a fierce resentment for the British. In 1818, Jackson had marched into Spanish-held Florida, capturing the city of Pensacola and hanging 2 British trappers for spying. This unsanctioned action allowed for the eventual American acquisition of Florida. By imitating his patron, Harney believes he may be able to wrest the island from the British once and for all. He dispatches his subordinate, Captain George Pickett, to the island. The captain and a company of 90 men arrive on July 18th, establishing a camp overlooking Griffin's farm. From the moment of their arrival, their intentions were clearly not pacific. Known today for his disastrous charge at the Battle of Gettysburg, the young Captain Pickett was famous then for his actions in the Mexican War. When informed that he was outnumbered by the British, he is quoted as saying that he would make a Bunker Hill out of it. To To cover their operations on the island, the Americans begin construction of a redoubt overlooking the Hudson Bay Company's headquarters. A British delegation arrived to meet with Pickett, who responded with a proclamation declaring his orders. He ended the proclamation saying, "This being United States territory, no laws but those of the United States will be observed." An incensed Governor Douglas sees this as an incursion on British soil. 4 years earlier, a large contingent of soldiers and warships had been stationed in Victoria to keep the peace during a gold rush. Douglas immediately orders them to action. He dispatches Captain Geoffrey Hornby, a well-respected officer with a cool temperament, to prevent the landing of additional American troops. He is ordered to defend himself but not attack. In 2 days, Hornby and 2 warships reach the island. The British turn broadside to Pickett's camp, running at their guns. Captain Hornby goes ashore and meets with Pickett, threatening to fire if he does not leave the island. Pickett calls his bluff and refuses to stand down. Both sides face off, waiting for the other to flinch. Over the next several months, both sides are reinforced. When news of the dispute reaches Washington, D.C., President Buchanan orders Lieutenant General Winfield Scott, the highest-ranking officer in the Army, to personally go to the island to prevent all hostilities. Scott arrives on October 20th. He immediately orders the American defenses to be abandoned and for the soldiers to stand down. He meets with Douglas and brokers a deal allowing both sides to maintain a small presence of 100 men each in both encampments. He removes Harney from command and assigns Pickett to a unit in the west. Despite his efforts, Scott was not there to solve the border question, and for 12 years both camps would continue to watch the other as the island developed. On October 21st, 1872, Kaiser Wilhelm I, acting as an intermediary, rules that the islands belong to the United States. Both sides removed their forces in the following months. The intentions of both the American and British forces are made clear by their response to the crisis as well as the day-to-day routines of each camp. The British camp was recognized as a very comfortable place. They raised bunkhouses, officers' quarters, and a small hospital. Locals and visitors from Victoria often came to the camp for dances and other social events. As opposed to the social nature of the British camp, the American camp was clearly a camp of war. The infantry slept in tents. Their officers' house was adjacent to a large parade ground, and the Americans would drill every day except Sunday. When the original pig incident occurred, the British acted in a very civil way. They dispatched a magistrate to hear both parties and expected the Americans to participate. When Pickett's men set up camp, the initial response was to treat them as trespassers on Hudson Bay Company's property, not as an invading army. Neither Harney nor Pickett showed such restraint. Without orders, they had landed men on private property belonging to a foreign company, and had done everything in their power to ensure conflict. The 2 officers wanted a war. Were it not for the cool-headed Captain Hornby and the negotiating skills of General Scott, the Pig War would have had many more casualties than that one lone pig.